We are in the last week of our series, Totally Together. And if you've missed any of it, I'm going to ask you to go back and watch it, even if you're not married. Super applicable for all of us that aren't married, for all of you that aren't married. Nothing happened to Casey and I since last week. We're still good. But today I want to talk to you about totally fighting, and how do we fight well? Because fighting and arguing isn't a matter of if in our relationship, it's a matter of when. How do we fight in a way that brings healing and help instead of destruction and hurt? And in Psalm chapter 37, verse 8, it says this: stop being angry! Exclamation mark, right? Like, stop being angry. Turn from your rage. I feel like this should be in all caps, right? Like, why are you yelling at me? Turn from your rage. Do not lose your temper. It only leads to harm. And for some of us, Psalms 37 verse 8 describes our marriage. We are constantly angry. We're constantly losing our temper. And man, let me just say, when you lose your temper, you lose. When you lose your temper, everybody involved that you lost your temper with loses. Because what happens is we start throwing out accusations that aren't true, but we lost our temper and we got angry. We raise our tone and we start talking over, we start yelling over, we start saying names, and all of a sudden we have thrown out all these words. And hear me, you're free to say what you want, but you're not free from the consequences of the words that you say. And some of us, we throw these words and say, I didn't mean it, but you said it, and that word came from somewhere from the back of your brain or something you've been holding inside, and now we got some work to do. And the Bible says this in Psalms 37:8, stop being angry, stop losing your temper, turn from your rage. It only leads to harm. It only leads to you hurting your marriage. When we lose our temper and we turn into rage, it hurts our relationship with our kids, with our parents, with our friendships, even at our workplace. And when it comes to your marriage, it's really easy for us to get into arguments. It's easy for us to get in fights because we're two totally different, separate people trying to make a home, trying to make a family, trying to make one couple. We have two different backgrounds coming together, trying to make one family. We have two different sexes, a husband and a wife, that are coming together and making up one marriage, right? We've got all these things that are coming together, different strengths, different weaknesses, different communication skills. Men and women communicate completely and totally different. I had a buddy that sent me a text this past week that was really good, and it says this: 5 deadly terms used by a woman. The first one is this: fine. This is the word women use to end an argument when she knows she is right and you need to shut up. Fine. Number 2, nothing. Nothing always means something, and you need to be worried. Number 3, go ahead. This is a dare, not permission. Do not do it. Go ahead, see what happens, right? Whatever. A woman's way of saying screw you. I had to make that one G-rated. Number 5, that's okay. She is thinking long and hard on how and when you will pay for your mistake. Oh, that's okay. And she kind of grins with it, right? Bonus word is wow. This is not a compliment. She is amazed that one person could be so stupid. Wow, really? Wow. I've heard wow a lot the last few weeks. Wow. Even my daughter's, wow, Dad. I'm like, wow, right? Here's the deal. We no surprise here, we all communicate completely, totally differently. And that's all right. But the problem is when there is a breakdown in communication, and that's where most marriages, where most relationships struggle, and then there's frustration that starts building because we don't know how to communicate to one another. Last week, I had so many men come up to me and say, Justin, thank you for telling our wives that we really are that dumb. We need you to lay it out for us because we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. And I love that so many men came up and said this to me because here's what that means. Ladies, most men want to meet your needs and your wants. We just don't know how. Right? Guys, your wife wants to meet your needs and your wants. They just don't know how because we're not communicating it. And this leads to my first point. If we're going to fight and we're going to argue in a healthy way, we have to understand uncommunicated expectations or unrealistic expectations. I say this every marriage series we do. Uncommunicated expectations are unrealistic expectations. Ladies, he can't meet what he doesn't know. He cannot meet what he does not know. Men, she cannot meet your need and wants if you don't talk to her. And the biggest conflict and fights that are happening is because there is a breakdown somewhere in communication. Somewhere you have lost reception and you have lost the ability to really communicate to one another. And now you are frustrated. And here's what we start saying to one another. Well, if they really loved me, they would know. No, they wouldn't. Nah. Well, if we were really soulmates, if they were really the love of my, they would just be able to read my mind. No way. There's no way. My wife is still amazed that I can look off into the distance, drink a cup of coffee, and she'll say, what are you thinking about? And I'm like, nothing. And she's like, there's no way. There's no way that is humanly possible. I'm like, oh, yes, there is. I was probably thinking about Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and where I'd go first, right? I'm just like, just random things. And we're two totally, completely things. And couples are confused and couples are frustrated and couples are hurt. And most of us, it would be solved if we simply communicated our expectations, because every single one of us have expectations in the relationship, in our friendships, with our kids, with our parents, at the job site. And because we aren't communicating our expectations, it's unrealistic for you to have expectations. The other year, Casey and I are driving down to my sister and brother-in-law's house down in Longview, Texas, and there is kind of a last stop, a last McDonald's area gas station on the Turnpike in the Indian Nations, kind of down in the Broken Bow area. And I have the girls with me, and we're all driving, and the only one that needed to use the bathroom was Casey. So we stopped, and I'm like, hey, you go ahead and go in. We'll stay in the car. I'm trying to think efficiently because it's like when Google Maps tells you what time you'll be there, it's a suggestion. I'm like, I'm going to beat that by at least 15 minutes, right? It's a test of your manhood. Let's just be honest. Anyways, I need to stay focused. So I drop her off. And I see her walk into McDonald's. She has left her phone, her purse in, because it's just an in and out stop. And I see her walk into the McDonald's and walk all the way to the other side. So I thought, hey, I'm going to be a good husband. I'm going to drive on the other side of McDonald's and wait for her so she doesn't have to walk so far. Remember, she left her phone, her purse, all in the car. Casey comes out. She walks to the other side. There's no car there. Her husband, her kids are gone. What makes me sad, she wasn't worried that the rapture happened. She knew. She was like, I'm still here, and Justin's got to be here if I'm here. She walks outside, nothing. She walks back inside, goes to the other side. While she's walking to the other side, I pull around. Because I'm like, what's taking so long? She must have gone to the other side. She walks to the other side. I'm not there. I'm like, where is she, right? Like, what's happening? No phone, no way to communicate. And this goes on for literally about 5 minutes. I'm just circling around. She's going door to door, door to door. She can see me. I can't see her, right? And she's just like, stop, stop. And finally, I stop. She gets in, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I was trying to be nice. Stop yelling at me. Turn from your anger, Casey. Repent from your rage, right? I had good intentions, but my good intentions weren't communicated and it led to frustrations. And listen, that's what you can have the best intentions in the world, but if you're not communicating it, you may be trying to do something to help her that she never wanted you to do in the first place, and it's just frustrating her. You may be trying to do something for your husband that they never wanted you to do in the first place, and it's frustrating them. You have good intentions, but it's led to frustrations that have led to unfair fights, because our fights are unfair because we have a breakdown in our communication. So we have unfair expectations that lead to unfair fights that lead to a dysfunctional relationship. So what do? I'm glad you asked. We got to get better at communicating. And if we're going to get better at communicating, then here's our point. We got to get really good at listening and slow about speaking. This point right here will help every single relationship in your life. What I have found is people are drawn and attracted to good listeners. We get annoyed with good speakers. And I'm up here right now speaking. People that just talk all the time but never take time to listen, we get annoyed with. It becomes exhausting. If you want to find your life full of friendships, great relationship with your kids, great relationship with your aging parents, take time to listen. And we've got to get really good at listening and slow at speaking. James chapter 1, verse 19 through 20 says this, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." And I will say this, if you will get quick and good at listening and slow to speak, the result is you will become slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. Proverbs 18, verse 2 and 13 says, "Fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions." Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. And the number one thing I would say about communication is talking doesn't equal communicating. There is a massive difference. If we are communicating, we are getting really good at listening, but here's what happens. When we get in an argument, when we get in a disagreement, when we get in a fight, what happens so many times is we get busy talking and we only take a breath to get some more time to further our argument. Our spouse starts talking and we're not listening to them. We're not trying to get their perspective. We're not trying to understand where they're coming from, what their expectation was, what their frustration is. We're just waiting for them to stop talking so we can get to our second point in the argument. And we're not getting any understanding, so there's no healing that's happening because we're not getting good at listening. And if we're going to have healing if we're going to fight in a healthy way, we've got to get really good at listening. I'm amazed at men. We can be on a golf course with 4 of our buddies, hamming it up, having a great time, and one of our buddies will hit a tee shot. It will go 200 yards to the left, and we will hear this. I heard it hit 5 leaves, a branch, and bounce to the right. But we can't hear our wife that's 10 feet away from us. Moms, I'm amazed. Wives, I'm amazed. Casey can tell me which child has walked into my house based on the cadence of their footsteps going upstairs. I don't even know they're home. Casey be like, "Oh, Charlie's home. Oh, okay, Chloe's home," right? Like I can tell by the way they went up or down the stairs. And I'm like, "What are you?" But you're not hearing your husband because you're connected to the phone that's right in front of you. And what I have discovered is proximity does not equal connectivity. We can be close, but we're not connected. And if we're going to get connected to one another, we got to put down everything that's wanting to distract us. We've got to communicate on a regular basis expectations so that they can be realistic expectations. We've got to communicate and listen our frustrations and talk through some things instead of just to some things. Because several of us, we're talking to the problem, but never talking through the problem. And you've got to get through the problem outcome, and that means both of you've got to listen, both of you have to communicate, because unrealistic expectations, uncommunicated expectations are unrealistic expectations. We've got to learn to use our words to do good, which brings us to our second point. The second thing is this: you can't have bad words in a good marriage. Can't do it. I love this point. You can't have bad words in a good marriage. Proverbs 18, verse 20 through 21 says, wise words satisfy like a good meal. The right words bring satisfaction. The tongue can bring life or death, death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Can I tell you, there is no neutral ground when it comes to the words you are using. It's either life or death, good or evil. How are you using your words? Because a ton of us, we're here, we're tuning in online, and we're expecting a good marriage, but we are constantly using bad words. What are bad words? It's accusations, it's name calling, it's losing our tempers, it's lies, it's half-truths, right? And we're never saying good, we're always saying evil, and we don't know why our marriage is falling apart, because you can't have a good marriage and bad words. You can't have a great marriage and bad words. Words are everything. The other day, literally this past summer, Casey was making me a peach cobbler. She had gotten some fresh peaches. My wife is a great baker. Like, she is a really good baker. And she was making me a peach cobbler, which is probably my favorite dessert she makes. She pulls it out. She's got the homemade crust with lattice on the top, the fresh peaches. It smells good. I'm just sitting there like, she pulls it out of the oven. I'm like, can I eat it? And she's like, Justin, you're going to burn your mouth. You can't eat it, right? I'm like a toddler all of a sudden. She's like, 5 minutes pass. I'm like, hey, can I eat it now? Justin, you're going to burn your mouth. You need to sit there. I'm not going to blow on it. Like, you got to sit there and wait for it to cool down. Like, and so finally it gets to the time I can eat the peach cobbler. And I take a bite of peach cobbler, and she's looking at me because she's worked hard on it. I'm looking at her, and I can't wait. And I take a massive bite, and it doesn't taste right. Now I'm in a conundrum. Because my wife has worked very hard, very selflessly to provide a peach cobbler to me that I don't like the taste of it. And I'm like, be very careful what you do in the next few moments, Justin. And she goes, how is it? And I'm like, I don't know. And she looks at me and she's like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, turn from your rage, Casey. I'm like, it just tastes off. And she's like, well, take another bite. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to, but okay. I take another bite, and she's like, how about now? And I'm like, I feel like I'm eating fajitas. And she's like, what? And I'm like, I swear, I feel like I'm eating fajitas. Maybe I have COVID, I don't know. She had a cold at that moment, so she can't smell stuff. It looks like peach cobbler. It smells like peach cobbler. It looks yummy, but it's not. You know, I'm just like, it's just not. And so I'm like, let's ask Charlie. Charlie was home. I'm like, Charlie, try this. Charlie takes a bite, and she takes a bite, and I didn't even set it up. I go, how'd it taste? She goes, that's off. That tastes like fajitas. I'm like, see, it wasn't just me. It tastes like fajitas. And she's like, what in the world? And she went back to the pantry, and she had grabbed the ground cumin that looked just like the ground cinnamon. And you put a lot of cinnamon in peach cobbler, and then it worked its way all through that cobbler. I'm like, see, I don't have COVID. And there wasn't like a section of it that we could spare or we could save, right? She didn't realize it until it was too late. She didn't mean for it to happen, but it didn't. And it affected and worked its way all the way through the cobbler. And you can't have bad ingredients and end up with good results and a good outcome. And listen, your words are everything with your marriage. And it is the ingredients of your marriage. And you can't keep putting in bad words and expecting a good outcome and good results, because you are choosing to let your emotions lead your life and speak bad instead of life, speak death instead of life. And something's got to change. I love this quote. It says, kind words cost nothing but are worth everything. And in your marriage, The person you are married to needs to hear more encouraging words from you than anybody else. And men, let me challenge you to lead the way in this today. Kind words cost nothing but mean everything. Well, Justin, it feels weird for me to give her a compliment. Get over yourself. It feels weird because you never do it. Do it until it stops feeling weird. And then keep doing it. Ladies, can I tell you the number one person he needs to hear that is proud of him is from you. He's working his butt off. He's doing the best he can. And the person he's dying to hear, man, I am so proud of you. I love you. Thank you for all that you do. He needs to hear it from you. Kind words cost nothing but mean everything. So what do we do? What do we do when we have a marriage that we haven't used good words, and as a result, we don't have a good relationship? What do we do when we've got friendships that are this way? When we have parent and child relationships that are this way? Let me give you this. It's our third point. Understand, it's not about getting even. It's about getting over. It's not about getting even with them. It's about getting over it. Ruth Bell Graham said this: a happy marriage is a union of two good forgivers. Romans chapter 12, verse 17 through 18 says, don't repay anyone evil for evil. This word repay means to reimburse. I like that. Don't reimburse evil for evil, right? You're like, oh, I heard that code 3 word you use. I'm going to raise you to a level 5 code word. I got you. I got your word, and I'm going to reimburse you with some money, right? Like, I got you. Oh, you're going to do, I'm going to do this. Don't pay back evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. And this part's really, really hard, and I love it and hate it all at the same time. If it is possible, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you. And here's what Paul is saying. You do you. Right? Stop trying to take responsibility for everybody else, and you do your part. You do you. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. The goal isn't to get back at everyone, to get even with everyone, or get your swings and licks in with everyone. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, even when they insult you, live at peace with them. And let's circle back to that and let them calm down. Even if they've done you wrong, as far as it depends on you, can you get, because the goal is to get over it, not to get even with them. So stop focusing on trying to win the fight and instead focus on resolving the issue and the conflict. And if we're going to focus on resolving the issue and conflict, there's 3 things we have to do as married couples specifically. The first one is this: you can't shut down. I've got to go fast here. You can't shut down. You got to talk. Men, you can't just shut down and become a robot. If you need a minute, take a minute. If you're going to say something because you're getting angry, go take a 5-minute walk. But some of you have taken a 5-minute walk that's lasted for 5 years. You can't shut down. The issue's not going to get better by you ignoring it and by you shutting down about it. One of you in the relationship's the communicator and one of you isn't. Casey and I used to have what she termed Justin talks. Believe it or not, I'm the talker in the relationship. Shocking, I know. But I was like, hey, we got to talk and we got to get through this. And some of you got to make sure you're not shutting down, but you're communicating through. The second thing is this: no spouting off. Proverbs chapter 29:11 says, fools vent their anger, but the wise quietly hold it back. Ecclesiastes 7:9, control your temper. For anger labels you a fool. And if you don't control your temper, here's what happens. Your temper controls you. If you don't control your temper controls you. And what happens when our temper controls us is the fruit of my self-led spirit gets in front of the fruit of the spirit. My anger, my rage, my emotions, my short-sightedness gets in front of peace, of goodness, of gentleness, of self-control, of kindness. And what are you letting lead you? Because if you just think it and spout it, you're destroying your marriage, and you can't have a good marriage and bad words. You can't have a good marriage and still hold grudges and not forgive them. You've got to get over it. The last thing is this: no holding out. Some of you are like, now it just got interesting. Is he talking about the thing? I'm talking about sex. Let's make no unclear. I want to clearly communicate my expectation here. Sex can't be weaponized. It can't be weaponized. It can't be something that you give because they've done something that makes you happy, and it can't be something that you remove because you are upset with them. Hear me, I've got to be very careful here. Hold on. You need to work through some things. But you can't weaponize sex. In Christian marriages, Christians should be having great, healthy sex in their marriages on a regular basis. Man, there was one guy that had the courage to say, amen. Whoever you are, thank you. I just treated you guys like Joe Biden and gave you the biggest softball just now, like. All the guys like, I don't know what to do right now. I'm so uncomfortable. It's got to be healthy and regular, on a regular basis. It doesn't need to be weird. It doesn't need to be weaponized. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 and verse 31 through 32 says this: don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. And that's my prayer. God, let people that hear my words be encouraged by them. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, right, I love that Paul's like, hey, stop doing this, but he also tells us that's half the battle. Don't just do things that are destroying your relationships. Don't just stop doing bad things. Instead, be kind to each other. Tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. You know, I love rom-coms and movies and The Notebook and all these other things, right? Some of you are like, really? Really? I love them. But I have a problem with Hollywood and the movies because they're really great at showing people falling in love. Right? They meet and the strangers have a glance at a restaurant or over coffee and they're like, oh, wow, I've never seen that guy before, right? And they start meeting and their hands happen to glance each other and they feel magic and there's music playing and they start meeting, and when they kiss, if you're watching Hallmark Movie Channel, it begins to snow and, they show everything that gets to the marriage and they get married and then the movie stops. And they show all the stuff that leads up to the marriage, but can I tell you, when it stops, that's when the real work begins. And some of us just got married and we expected it to just feel as magical as we were dating, and there's moments and there's seasons, but can I tell you, that's when the real work begins. That's when, if you are going to live happily ever after, you decide that that's going to be the path you walk down. That's going to be how you conduct yourself. That's going to be how you communicate. That's how you're going to talk. That's how you're going to forgive one another quickly and completely as Jesus forgave us. Let me encourage you with my last point today. If you're going to live happily ever after, if you're going to stay totally together, decide you aren't going anywhere before life gets hard. Decide you're not going anywhere before life gets hard. If you're sitting by your spouse, if you're sitting by your husband or wife, I'm going to ask you to just grab their hand real quick. 17 years ago, when Casey and I started Foundation Church, not even before we started Foundation Church, was probably the hardest season of our marriage. And it wasn't necessarily difficult because we had been mean to each other, that we had mistreated each other. It was hard because of the situations and circumstances we were going through. I'd gotten fired at my previous church unfairly. I'll just be honest, it just wasn't a fair deal. And they gave me a severance package, but it was based on that we don't talk to anybody from church. We were broke. We were broke. And we had no option of whether we could take the severance package or not. We had to take the severance package. And I remember us moving to Tulsa, and when I moved to Tulsa, we had this dream to start a church named Foundations Church. And we didn't know if it was going to work out. And before we started the church, I had to get a job at Starbucks. And I'm working at Starbucks, and I'm slinging coffee, and I had to get something for insurance because I needed insurance for me and Casey and both my daughters. I had to do what I needed to do. I'd work the early morning shift at 4:30 in the morning so that I could be off by noon and could start working on church planning. And man, people would come in that knew me from being a youth pastor when I was a youth pastor in Tulsa, and it was so humiliating. I was absolutely demoralized when I would run into people. I didn't want to go to church because people at churches would be like, hey, you used to be a pastor. What are you doing here? They would run into Starbucks and be like, hey, you used to be a youth pastor. What are you doing here? And I would tell them, oh, we're going to start a church. And they're like, oh, sure you are. Good luck. Good luck with that little dream. And I'm embarrassed. I'm angry. I'm embarrassed that I put my family in this situation. I'm angry that I put my family in this situation. And then there's Casey. And Casey's crushed. Casey's upset. Casey's mad. Casey's angry. Why are people so mad? Why are pastors so mad? Why do churches hurt people? And today, if you're here, you'll watch online, and you're like, Justin, I've been hurt so bad by church. I get it. I get it. And we're sitting there, and can I tell you, it was really, really difficult. We got 2 little kids, and life didn't look anything like we thought it was going to look like when we made our vows. For better, for worse. And right in that moment, we were in the worst part of our vows. And we didn't decide in that moment that we were going to stick together. We decided 17 years ago when we made vows, we meant it. That while we were in the better part, I'm not going anywhere. When life gets hard, I'm not going anywhere. You may get really irritated at me. I'm still here. It may be really difficult, but I'm still here. And some of you want to wait to decide, hey, I'm not going anywhere until it gets hard, but there's a way better way to do it. And before life gets really hard, decide you're not going anywhere. Remember my dad and my mom. My mom's she's passed away for 13 years ago. My mom passed away at age 57 years old. Literally right when my mom and dad pretty much got done paying for my college, right when they get done having the kids out of the house and they're starting to get grandkids, my mom gets sick. And all of a sudden, the dreams that they have of what retirement's going to look like, of traveling, all of a sudden, the dreams of what my dad probably envisioned that their financial life was going to look like, man, got wrecked. Because my mom is in kidney failure. And it didn't stop there. We went from kidney failure to heart issues, from heart issues to strokes. So now the woman that he pledged for better for worse when she's having strokes, it's not the same woman. She's in there, but she's a prisoner of her body. And all the things they thought life was going to look like didn't look like it. And yet they decided, my dad, man, you killed it, Randy Graves. Woo. He owned it. And he looked at my mom and said, I'm not going anywhere. This isn't what I thought it was going to look like. I wasn't planning for being here. But I'm not going anywhere. We said for better, for worse, I'm in it. And some of you are struggling with addictions in your marriage. Decide you're not going anywhere before it gets any harder. Some of you, you're struggling with the finances. Decide you're not going anywhere before it gets any harder. Some of you, you're struggling with the death of a child. I cannot imagine. Life doesn't look like what you thought. Your marriage doesn't look like what you thought. Decide right now, right in this moment while you're holding their hand, I'm not going anywhere. Because that's what love looks like. Let me leave you with this. I'm done. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 7, out of the Amplified says this: love bears all things, regardless of what comes. I love that. It believes all things, looking for the best in each one, hopes all things, remaining steadfast during difficult times, and endures all things without weakening. Love never fails. It never ends, it never fades. Love bears all things, regardless of what comes. Let's pray. Lord, we love you and we thank you for today. Lord, in this very holy moment, God, I just pray that we would do some self-evaluation. Because there's been some of us, we've just been fighting in our marriage instead of for it. And I just pray there would be a conviction that we have. And that, Lord, when we leave this place in a few minutes, we would leave with the resolve, man, to put in good words, to speak life, to speak encouragement, so that we can have a good marriage. And Lord, there's some of us, we're in a rough moment. There's some of us, God, life looks nothing like what we thought it was going to look like. And we're not in the better part of our vows, we're in the worst part. Lord, I pray right now, right there, that we would just have a resolve as a couple that we're not going anywhere. We're going to work through this. We're going to get through this. We're going to forgive. We're going to get over it. We're not going to spout off. We're going to listen. And we're going to continue to love like you've called us to love, that we are going to endure anything, that we're not just here for the good, we're here for the worse. And so, Lord, I pray that your love would wrap around every single one of these couples, and there would be a still-like resolve in their hearts, in their commitments to themselves and to one another, that they're not going anywhere. But they're going to stay faithful, they're going to stay consistent, and they're going to be the man and the woman of God you've called them to be. It's in Jesus' name I pray.